Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph at the very top. The Mishnah had stated a klal of 4 different cases. It stated that when one did not make an eruv with the rest of the Bnei Chotzer, he can go ahead and mevatel his reshus to the rest of the Bnei Chotzer. The second case in the klal is that they can mevatel their reshus to him. Ask the Gemara, but those cases were already stated in the Mishnah. To which the Gemara explains, these are coming to state a chiddush for the third case. What is the third case? That 2 people can mevatel their reshus to one person. Let's say there's a chotzer with 3, 2 who made an eruv together can mevatel their reshus to one. Ask the Gemara, what's the chiddush? That you might think that if you're allowing 2 to mevatel their reshus to one, then one can maybe also mevatel his reshus to 2 who did not make their eruv. And that's not true, because each one is oiser zeh al zeh. Kamash malan, we don't make such a gzeir, and we allow 2 people to mevatel their reshus to one. Now the Gemara brings the 4th of the 4 cases in the klal. Ve'einoitlin reshus, and they, the 2 of them, cannot take reshus from the Bnei Chotzer. Ask the Gemara, Lamali, again, of course, if these 2 did not make an eruv with each other, then of course they're going to be oiser zeh al zeh. So even if they are all going to mevatel the reshus to these 2, it's not going to be valid. So ein noitlin reshus. Ask the Gemara, Lamali, why do I need this case? Explains the Gemara, lo tzricha. Afal gav da amrei le kni al manas lahaknois. Even though, on top of the chiddush that we said, when you have the Bnei Chotzer that are going to mevatel their reshus to 2 people who did not make an eruv together, and we say that's poshit, they're not going to be then they're not going to be able to then mekabel the reshus because they're oiser zeh al zeh. We said there's a chiddush in that as well, because after all, maybe after they're all mevatel reshus to the 2 of them, one of the 2 will then mevatel not only his reshus but all of the reshus that he was receiving from them to the other one. Maybe that's valid. The Gemara had said that that's not valid because at the time that he wants mevatel that the reshus that he received from all the Bnei Chotzer, he doesn't have the right to do so because he cannot go ahead and metaltel in that Chotzer, since he is then part and partial, a partner with the other one, and they did not make an eruv together, so they're oisrin zeh al zeh. Now the Gemara says a tosefes chiddush. If they were mevatel their chotzer to this one person of the 2, and they made a t'nai al manas lahaknois, on condition that you will be then makne, maybe that should work. Kamash malan, we say, still, when the Bnei Chotzer are mevatel the reshus to 2 of them, even if they say to one of them, al manas lahaknois, as if he's going to be a shaliach to mevatel his reshus to the other one, it still will not work, it's invalid. Abayi asked Rabba the following question. Chamisha sheshruyin bechotzer achas, v'shochach echad mehem v'lo erav. You have 5 people sharing the same chotzer. One of them neglected to be included in the eruv chatzeus of the other 4. What's the din? Kishehu mevatel reshusoi tzorich levatel lekol echad ve'echad oy loy. When he is now mevatel his reshus to the other 4, does he have to mevatel reshus to each and every one of them? Or it's sufficient for him to mevatel reshus to just one? In other words, do we say that they're all considered to be combined as one, and therefore he can mevatel reshus only to one of them? That's sufficient because they enjoined in one chotzer? Or no? We say that granted they have an eruv chatzeus together, however, that was not including his chelik. And now that he's mevatel his reshus, he would have to mevatel his reshus to each and every one of them. Omar le, Rabba responds to Abayi's query, tzorich levatel lekol echod ve'echod. Indeed, he must mevatel his reshus to each and every one of them. Granted, again, they made an eruv chatzeros together and they enjoined as one, but that did not include his chelik. So now that he's going to mevatel his reshus to the other 4, he must mevatel to each and every one according to Rabbah. Eisve, the Gemara asks from the following brisa. Now the brisa has several cases. We'll split it into a reisha and a seifa as follows. Echad shaloi eirav noisin reshusu leechad she'eirav. When one did not make an eruv, and we're assuming over here, explaining that the case over here is that there are three people sharing the chutzner. One who did not make the eruv together with the other two, it says he can mevatel his reshus to one. So here we already have a proof like Abaye, which is really going to be a kasha on Rabbah. Not a proof for Abaye, because Abaye was asking the question, but it will be a kasha on Rabbah's response. Because here it states in the Brisa that one can mevatel his reshus to one, and doesn't mevatel his reshus to each and every one of the bnei chutzner. The Gemara explained why this is mukhrach, that we're talking about that there are three over here, that when one was vatil his reshus to one, as opposed to both of them. The Brisa goes on to say a second case, Shnayim she'irvu noisnim reshusun le'echod shelo eruv. Two who did make an eruv together, and there's three in the chutzner. The two of them who made the eruv together can mevatil the reshus to the third one who did not make an eruv with them. The third case has two parts. Shnayim shelo irvu, two that did not make an eruv. Noisnim reshusun le'shnayim she'irvu. The first part is that two that did not make an eruv can mevatel their reshus to two that did make an eruv together, or le'echad shelo eruv, or the two of them did not make an eruv can mevatel the reshus to a third person who shared the chutzner with them. When there are three of them in the chutzner, and they can mevatel the reshus to one who did not make an eruv. That's the reisha of this brisa. So again, the reisha to sum up the three cases is talking about a case, Aleph, where there are three people in the chutzner. One who did not make an eruv, he can mevatel his reshus to one of the two who did make an eruv together. The second case is talking about where two made an eruv together. Again, there are three in this chutzner, and the two of them can mevatel their reshus to the third who did not make an eruv with them. The third case is talking about the first part where there are four people in the chutzner. Two people who did not make an eruv can mevatel the reshus to two people who did make an eruv, or the two people who did not make an eruv can mevatel the reshus to one person who did not make an eruv with them. That's the reisha of this brisa. Now the seif of the brisa brings a contrast. Aval ein echad she'erav noisein reshusa le'echad shelo erav. One, however, who did not make an eruv, he cannot go ahead. One who made an eruv cannot make a bitul reshus to one of the other two that did not make an eruv. In other words, the three again in the chutzner. One of them made an eruv with the other one, and he cannot mevatel the reshus to the one who did not make an eruv, because the one he did not make an eruv with did not make an eruv with the one who is left. So when there's three of them, even if the one who made the eruv was mevatel reshus to one who did not make the eruv, it's going to be oiser ze al ze. The second case in the seifa, vein shnayim she'irvu noisnim reshusun shel shayim shelo irvu, and two people did not make an eruv, they cannot mevatel the reshus to two people who did not make an eruv, again because they were oiser ze al ze. The third case in the seifa, vein shnayim shelo irvu noisnim reshusun l'shnayim shelo irvu, and two that did not make an eruv cannot mevatel the reshus to two that did not make an eruv, again for the same reason, because they will not be able to mevatel, because they're going to be oiser ze al ze. Ad kan, the brisa, the Gemara now is medayik from the reisha of the reisha, the very first case of the brisa, as a kasha on Rabbah, as was explained before. Kitani mihas reisha. It was taught, however, in the reisha, echad shelo eirav, noisim reshus leechad she'erav. One who did not make an eruv, he can mevatel the reshus to one that did make an eruv. Now the Gemara now will prove that we're talking about a scenario where there were three people in the chutzner, and one, again, who did not make an Eruv is coming vatal to one of the two who did make the Eruv, as follows. Hey Chidami, the Gemara is analyzing this brisa. If there was not three of them, there was only two of them, and the one who did not make the Eruv is mevatel to the other one that made an Eruv, who is that other one making an Eruv with? It must be, perforce, there was somebody else that was in the Chatzah that he made an Eruv with. There must be that there are three of them. Rather, it must be, it's pashit, that there were three people. There was the one who did not make the Eruv, who was mevatel zevishus to one of the two that did make an Eruv together. But and it says that one of them made an Eruv. So now we have a kasha on Rabbi. Rabbi said when there's five people in the chutzner, in this case 3 people in the chutzner, then you have to mevatel yeshus to each and every one. Yet we see from this brisa, in this reisha, the reisha, that the one who did not make an Eruv is mevatel yeshus to one of the two, not both, each and every one of the two. Answers the Gemara for Rabba, V'Rabba, Dehocha Mayaskin, Dahava Omis. Rabba says in Ukimta, in this ratio, the ratio, we're talking about that there were 3 people, granted, and the one that did not make the Eruv was mevatel the reshus to one of them, because the second one had already died. So that's why he's only mevatel to one. But had the person been alive, according to Rabba, he'd have to mevatel reshus to that second person as well. Ask the Gemara on this case, on this ukimta that Rabbi is making, dahava umis ema seifa. If we're talking about that indeed there was somebody in that chatzar who then died, then let's be consistent with the seifa. It says in the seifa, aval ein echad she'erav noisim v'shus le'echad shelo erav. But one who did not make an eruv cannot mevatel v'shus to one that did not make an eruv. V'dahava umis amai loy. If indeed we're talking about that the third person died, so then why can't he mevatel his reshus to the one that did not make an eruv? He's the only one that's left. So it's a kasha on Rabbo Zukimta that the person existed but he died. Ella pshita de'isei. You must say that the person was indeed there. Umid the seifa de'isei, reishanami de'isei. Once you say that we're talking about there was a person in the seifa, I knew there was 3 people, and nobody died. So then let's be consistent and say in the Reisha also there were 3 people and nobody died. And just like we proved against Rabbah that the one who did not make an Eruv can mevatel reshus to one of the 2 that made the Eruv. Ask the Gemara, in other words, to then be doiche this kasha on Rabbah and support Rabbah and say no. Midi area. The Reish and the Seif are independent. And therefore you can learn the Reisha the way it is. And you can learn, which is the case of Rabbah, is that one of them died. In the case of the Sefer, that one did not die. Now the Gemara says, Teida, we'll bring you the following proof, says the Gemara, going back on Rabbah's case that one died in the Reisha. Diktani Sefer de Reisha, because it says in the Sefer, in the Reisha, the third case in the Reisha, Vishnayim shelo irvu, noisni reshus and the she'irvu. 2 that did not make an Eruv. Here we're talking about that there are 4 people, because 2 that did not make an Eruv, says the Sefer the Reisha, is mevatel their reshus to 2 that did make an Eruv. So we're talking about a case where there's 4 over here. L'shnayim in le'echad loy. Rabbah is proving, you see from here, to 2 he's coming to mevatel and not to 1. Why do the 2 of them who did not make an Eruv have to mevatel to the 2 of them that made an Eruv? If indeed it's enough to say that you can mevatel to 1, so why does it say that they're mevatel to 2? Elamai, Rabbah proves himself that indeed that when there is somebody who is still alive, you have to mevatel to each and every one of them. And this is now is going to be a proof for Rabbah to explain that in the very Reisha, we're talking about that he died. And only that's why he was able to mevatel only to one of the 2. V'Abai Omar, Abai says, my lebeis le'echad mi beis. Abai says, when it says in that case of the Sefer Deresh that we just quoted, 2 that did not make an Eruv are mevatel to 2 that made an Eruv, it really means lavdafka, that the 2 that did not make an Eruv can mevatel to one of the two. So it's not necessarily a proof that's muchrach for Rabbah. Ihochi asked the Gemara, if that's the case, like we're talking about one of the two, then lisni le'echad she'eruv or le'echad shelo eruv. Why didn't it teach then to one that he made an eruv or one that he did not make an eruv? Kasha, it's shver, it's a difficulty on the lashon according to the way Abaye is explaining. Now the Gemara wants to analyze the brayso that we had quoted before. Again, we said that there's a reisha which has 4 cases and a seifa that has 3 cases. The Gemara goes through each case in the brayso to explain its chiddush. Echad shelo eirav noisin reshusah leechad she'erav. One who did not make an eruv, he can go ahead and mevatel his reshus to one that did make an eruv, and we explained that before as being that there's 3 here. One did not make an eruv, can mevatel his reshus to one of the 2 that did make an eruv. La'abaye di'isei, according to Abaye, this is indeed, the person is there, and therefore that was the chiddush of Abaye. Kamash malan de'ein tzar levatel reshus lekol echad ve'echad. That's, according to Abaye, means that he only has to then mevatel his reshus to one, but not to everybody. L'Rabba dahava umis. But according to Rabba, we're talking about a scenario that one of those 2 did die, and that's why he's able to mevatel his reshus only to one of them, the one who's alive. V'lo gazinu zimnin de'isei, and we don't make a gezeira. According to Rabbi, the chiddush is we don't make a gezeira that when he is there, you'd have to mevatel to each one. So therefore, if he did die, you would not be able to mevatel. Kamash milan, you could mevatel to the one of the 2 since the second one died. That's the first case of the reisha of the brayso. The second case of the reisha. Vishnayim she'irvu noisnim reshusum le'echa shelo irav. 2 who made an eruv can mevatel their reshus to the one, the third, who did not make an eruv. There are 3 people in the chotzer, 2 made an eruv together. They can mevatel their reshus to one who did not make an eruv. Ask the Gemara Pshita. Certainly they can. After all, he's the only one that's now left in the eruv. What would be the problem of mevatel their reshus to him? No, since he did not make an eruv, so you might say, well, knas him. We'll knas him and say that they cannot mevatel the reshus to him. Komash malan, we don't make a knas. Now the Gemara analyzes the third case of the reisha of this brayso. Ubei sheloi irvu noisnin reshus l'shnayim she'irvu. Now we're talking about a scenario where there are 4 people in the chotzer. 2 people who did not make an eruv can mevatel their reshus to 2 people who did make an eruv together. So the Gemara says, L'Rabba, according to Rabba, who understands you have to mevatel to each one, Tana Sefer Legilui Reisha. This is coming to Megale on the Reisha, that indeed you have to mevatel to each one, and that's why it states that the 2 of them have mevatel to 2 of them. Le'abaye, Beis Sheloi Irvu Itzrichale. Rabbi is saying there's a chiddush over here, that the 2 that did not make an eruv, that needs to be taught to us over here, to mevatel to the other 2. Why? I might think make a gezerah, because perhaps they'll come to mevatel to them. In other words, since if you allow 2 people to mevatel, 2 people made an eruv to mevatel to 2 people, 2 people did not make an eruv to mevatel to 2 people who made an eruv, you might think that 2 people made an eruv can mevatel to 2 people who did not make an eruv, which would not be true because each one is oiser zeh al zeh. And therefore, maybe this is also not going to be valid to allow 2 people mevatel on 2 that did make an eruv. Komash malon, we don't make a gezerah. Now the Gemara explains the 4th case of the reisha of the brayso. When 2 people who did not make an eruv are mevatel their reshus to one who did not make an eruv. Lamali, why do we need this case? Certainly, if they're mevatel to a third who is now the only one left in the chotzer, certainly they can mevatel the reshus to him. So what is the chiddush here? Ma'u, the same, you might like to say, Hani mili heicha the mikzosan irvu umikzosan lo irvu. When is it true that you're able to mevatel the reshus when at least somebody in that chotzer made an eruv? But here we're talking about a scenario where 2 people did not make an eruv, who are mevatel to a third who did not make an eruv. Nobody made an eruv. So therefore, you might think over here there's a problem. Aval heicha de kulon lo irvu, de kliknesu kedei shelo tishtachach teras eruv. since nobody made an Eruv in this scenario, you might think then it's not going to be valid when two are mevatil to the third, because then mevatil the whole inyan of Taras Eruv, meaning the whole institution of Eruv. The children in the future generations will think that there's no such thing as an Eruv. You can have a situation over here where everybody just is mevatil to the other one. Kamash Malan, we still allow two to mevatil who did not make an Eruv to mevatil to a third who did not make an Eruv, and say that it's valid. Kamash Malan, that's going to be something that can be done. That's the ratio of the Brisa. The Gemara now turns to the Seif of the Brisa to analyze that. So we took care of 4 different cases in the ratio. Now the Gemara analyzes the last 3 cases in the Brisa. Aval ein echad she'irav noisein reshus le'echad shelo irav. We don't allow one who made an eruv to mevatel his reshus to one that did make an eruv. Sorry, we do not allow one who made an eruv to mevatel his reshus to one who did not make an eruv. In other words, there are 3 people in the scenario. One of the 2 who made an eruv cannot mevatel his reshus to the one who did not make an eruv, because that one that he's mevatel reshus to is still oiser ze al ze with the other one, because he didn't make an eruv with that other person. According to Abaye, this seifa is come to megale on the ratio. How is that so? Because here we're talking about that when you have 3 people, in the seifa which says that we do not allow one who made an eruv to mevatel on his reshus to the one who did not make an eruv, which means that there are 3 people involved over here. And the Reisha in contrast says that he could go ahead and mevatel the one who did not make an eruv to one of the 2 that did make an eruv. So it's coming to Megala that's enough to mevatel to one and not to both of them. That's according to Abaye. L'Rabba, what do you need this case according to Rabba? Aidi detana Reisha taninami seifa. This is only being taught agav the Reisha. In other words, according to Rabba, once we teach the case in the Reisha, we're teaching the case of the Seifa as well. Even though there's no explicit Chiddush over here, only Rabba said that the Reisha is talking about a Kimta where one of the 3 died. Whereas over here, Rabba says that there are 3 people and they're all alive. Each one is alive, and they're not really totally zeh b'zeh. They're 2 different independent cases, the Reisha and the Seifa. Now the Gemara goes on to teach then, to analyze the next case of the Sefer, which is the second case of the Sefer. The ein shnaim she'irvu noistim reshus and the shnaim shelo irvu. And 2 people who made an eruv cannot mevatel their reshus to 2 people who did not make an eruv. Ask the Gemara, hasulamali. If they did not make an eruv, then they're oiser zel zeh. Certainly, the 2 who made an eruv cannot mevatel their reshus. The 2 who did not make an eruv. Explains the Gemara lo tzricha. The batil leichad meinayu lechavrei. That after the 2 were mevatel reshus to 2 of them, so one of the 2, he was mevatel not only his own reshus, but also the reshus that he received from the other 2 to the second person. And therefore, Ma'od Desem, you might think to say, lishteri lei, that he's able to do that. Kamash malon, we say, kivan de beidna de batil loy havali sharyusib b'hochotzer, and therefore loy. Here, we'll think that maybe that would be valid, since he's now putting he's mevatel all what he has to the other person. That might be a valid way to then allow the latter person to then be mutter, to then use now the chotzer. Kamash malan, when the person who wants to mevatel his reshus, he received the reshus from the other 2, it wasn't in his ability to use the chotzer to then go ahead and mevatel that which he just received from them and mevatel to the other person. And therefore it's not going to be valid, even though he wants to mevatel not only his chelik of the chotzer, but even the chelik that he received from them. He doesn't have the reshus to do that. And now, finally, the Gemara analyzes the 3rd case in this Sefer, the final case of the Brisa. Ve'ein shnayim shelo irvu, noistim reshus l'shnayim shelo irvu. And 2 people who did not make an eruv cannot mevatel their reshus to 2 people who did not make an eruv. Now again, that's poshut, because if 2 people did not make an eruv, they're oisrin zeh al zeh. So certainly 2 who did not make an Eruv cannot mevatel to two who did not make an Eruv, because each one who receives the Rishus is going to be oyster on the other one. Hasu lamali, says the Gemara, lo tzricha de amrei kni amanas lahaknois. Here, there's a chiddush that when they were makne, then they're mevatel the Rishus to the two of them. So to one of them, they said kni, acquired, almanas lahaknos to the other one, meaning as a shliach on our behalf. Kamash malan, even though that he does want to vatil not only his rishus, but even the rishus that he received from them. Here you might think as a shliach he can do so. Kamash malan, he cannot do so, and therefore it's going to be invalid.